Welcome to episode 30 of the Seed Farmer Podcast, the podcast where I want to convince you to harvest seeds from some of the vegetables and flowers growing in your farm or garden, and then to plant that seed out to grow delicious vegetables and beautiful flowers. If you enjoy the Seed Farmer Podcast and find it as a good resource that helps you improve your seed work and farming, please support the show at spreadsheet.farm/support podcast. The link is also in the show notes. I'm your host, Dan Brisebois, seed grower at Tournesol Cooperative Farm and author of The Seed Farmer, a complete guide to growing, using, and selling your own seeds. So the big thing these days in my life at Tournesol Farm is that I'm nearing the end of garlic. Garlic is really what takes over August. I mean, we do a lot of seed work still at this point, but garlic, this early August is going to be the harvest begins, but we also take a lot of pre-orders for garlic, both that are delivered through our CSA and then also that are going to be shipped out, or that would take the orders through the website to then ship them out through the mail. And we like to have those orders shipped the first week or so of September. So it's really been these last 2-3 weeks cleaning garlic, packing garlic. We had a garlic festival. It was a really big garlic festival, the biggest maybe in 6 years. And we sold a lot of garlic, and we're really excited about it. So it's been garlic, and most of last week, Emily and I were just shipping orders. I think some of the rest of the Seed Warehouse team finished that off this morning, and now I'm able to start looking at other crops, such as the beans that I just noticed. They're still fine, but I think they should have come in last week, so spent the afternoon doing that. So that's a lot of what's been going on, is just garlic, and I'm relieved the harvest has been great, and I'm relieved to see it leave our farm to go into gardens across Canada, and farms across Canada. All right, so today's episode is a bit different in that I'm going to be solo on this episode, and I'm also aiming for a shorter episode. It's a busy time of year. I bet you can relate to that on your farm, and I'm having a hard time getting the full-length episodes out right now. So I think the next month or so is going to be these shorter episodes, and this episode is especially aimed at those of you listening who are excited about seeds, but still need a little bit of encouragement to take your first steps into harvesting seeds, into seed saving. And so for this episode, I want to walk you through a crop that I think is a great first seed crop and that is probably growing on your farm. So this episode is all about harvesting your own pepper seeds. I hope you enjoy the episode. So let's start off with peppers. What I essentially want you to know in this episode is that you can go out right now to your garden. You can listen to the podcast while you're just doing it, or put it on pause. Go out to your garden, and you can harvest a pepper off your plant. As long as it's ripe, open it up, take out the seeds, and the seeds from those peppers are probably going to be fairly true to type next year. There's a very low chance of crossing with other plants. There is some chance of crossing, and I'll get to that, but it's very minimal. And I guess the biggest thing is you want to make sure you have an open pollinated variety and not a hybrid. If you have a hybrid, and you can keep the seeds from the hybrid, and they'll grow out next year, but you get all kind of diversity. But if you have an open pollinated variety, go and harvest some seeds. The seed harvest is essentially to open up take the fruit, to cut out the outside, the flesh. You can eat it if you want, and you can rub those seeds onto a plate and make sure you have a label. This is like probably the most important part of seed work, is labeling everything. So label the variety, and you can put the date on. That's not as important, but label the variety and put it on your kitchen counter, and you can let it sit for a couple weeks, and then put it into an envelope. It could be a craft envelope. It could be, just an envelope that you'd mail a letter in. And again, write the name on it. Probably write peppers too, or pepper. Sometimes different varieties or different crops have different varieties that sound similar. And write the year that you kept this seed, because you won't necessarily remember what year it was from later on. And that's as simple as what it is to keep that seed. So that's the short of keeping peppers for seed. Now, this works because peppers are predominantly self-pollinated. This means that the petals of the pepper flower are pretty wrapped around the stamens and anthers inside the flower, and most of the pollen from a pepper plant will pollinate itself. There will be some cross-pollination, but most of it's going to pollinate itself. So that's why it's as easy as just going to get a pepper and keeping the seed. Now, if you had a couple onion varieties going to flower in your garden, or a couple radishes that were close together, there's a very high chance of cross-pollination. But if you're growing 2 peppers side by side, I think you're going to see rates of cross-pollination of less than 5%. So that means that you might grow out 100 plants, maybe you'd see 5 plants. But I don't think you'd even see that. I think you're just going to see 1 or 2 maybe that cross-pollinated, and probably none that cross-pollinated. And that's based on my own experience. I've been doing this for years. Now, when I grow seed to sell it, I grow pepper seed about 200 feet apart from other pepper varieties, because I don't want any chance of crossing. 1% is too much when I'm selling the seed. But what it's seed that I'm just going to be using on our farm or in my garden, in that case, I don't worry if there's 2 peppers, one beside each other. Now, I will say there's one caveat with that, which is sweet peppers and hot peppers can cross-pollinate together. They're the same species. In fact, I said they're the same species. There's actually a number of different pepper species, but in my experience, most of those peppers can cross-pollinate together. Now, when I talk to other seed growers, not all of them have had that experience. When I look in books, some books claim that certain species won't cross together, but in my experience, I've seen crossing in a lot of different pepper species. And so I am not comfortable telling people that 2 species won't cross. And so I kind of just deal with peppers as if it's one species. And if I'm growing for myself, then I know there's a chance of crossing. And if I'm going to be selling the seed, I'll grow, even if it's two different species, I grow them 200 feet apart. Now, back to sweet peppers and hot peppers. So, sweet peppers and hot peppers are essentially the same species of pepper, and they can cross-pollinate together. And this is the one thing that I don't want to have, and I assume you don't want to have, is sweet peppers that are accidentally hot and hot peppers that are accidentally mild. That's something that we want to avoid. We want to keep the hots hot and the sweets and mild, sweet and mild. I'm thinking more in terms of if you're planning for the future. So if you're planning for the future, grow your sweet peppers together, grow your hot peppers together. If they're a couple 100 feet apart, that's fantastic. Harvest them separately. At this point, if you've grown them side by side, ignore what I've just said and go out and harvest some peppers and keep them for seed. Now, if you're growing any open pollinated varieties, feel free to go and harvest a few fruit of each of them. Now, which fruit should you harvest? Harvesting any fruit is better than harvesting no fruit. But if you want to take a little bit longer, what you want to do is you want to choose the individual plants that are better, or that you think are better than the other plants around them. And they can be better for a lot of different reasons. They can be better for the way the plant looks, but they can also be better for the way the fruit on the plant looks. And they might be better because those had earlier fruit on them. Where we are, outside of Montreal in Canada, at this time of year, peppers are just starting to ripen. So if I see a plant that is much more ripe than the others, and especially if it's heavier on fruit, then I will definitely flag that plant. Or just I will harvest 2 or 3 fruits from it and keep seed from that to be some of my stock seed for the future, because I know I'll be selecting something just a little bit earlier than the rest of the plants in that population. So if you can identify what's earlier maturing, if stuff has heavier fruit, those are all things that are reasons to choose a specific plant. And you should know that the genetics on all the fruit on the plant are probably going to be fairly similar. If there's an outcrossing, that's something that's different, but most of the plant is going to be self-pollinated. So if you have one nice fruit on a plant and the rest of the fruits don't look great, they still have the same genetics. That's why you're looking at the whole plant, and you're looking at what the plant has to offer in terms of number of fruit and earliness and all that, when you might be choosing which pepper plants to choose fruit from. Now, if you're growing a few hundreds or even thousands of plants, in that case, I would go look for 5, 10 nice plants and take 1 or 2 fruit from each of them. It's a nice idea to have a balanced number of seeds from each plant to keep a bit of diversity. Because peppers are selfers, they don't suffer from inbreeding depression the same way some other crops do, and so you don't need as big a population of pepper plants as if you were dealing with beets or corn or some brassicas. So having 5 or 10 plants is already a good amount of diversity, especially for keeping seed for a few years. In an ideal world, you might be keeping peppers from 40 or 60 different plants to have a broader diversity. And if you are growing a couple thousand pepper plants, that works really well. But if you're just growing a smaller amount, a couple hundred, I think 5, 10, 15 plants is fine. So just go for that. Now, and even on our farm, so when we're growing a pepper for seed, that's going to be for sale, and we're growing a couple hundred plants, what I'll do is I go through and I'll harvest fruit from about 25 plants, the 25 best plants, and that's going to be my stock seed. And that's what I'm going to keep for seed the next year that I'm going to grow again. Then I harvest the seed from the rest of the plants, and I bulk that together. That's what we sell to the general public. And then the next time we grow this out, we're growing out from that stock seed, so it should be a better population for our needs than what the previous generation was. Then we again choose the best for ourselves, and then the next best is what we're going to sell again to our clients. But when you're just growing seed for yourself, you just choose the best fruit, or any fruit, as I said, but the best fruit is better than the other fruit, and any fruit is better than no fruit. So I guess that gets us to talk a little bit more about extraction. Now, as I mentioned at the beginning, it's as simple as taking a knife or just popping open the fruit and taking the seed out. You do want to have a pretty ripe fruit when you're going to be extracting the seed. The riper, the better the germination is going to be. Sometimes harvesting seed from fruit that's a little bit green can be good, but not always. So if you're worried about frost when you decide that you're going to keep the seed, maybe you harvest the fruit that's starting to ripen, then put it on a counter and let it finish ripening, and then you can extract the seed later on. When we're harvesting seed that's going to be for sale, we'll try to harvest everything that's totally ripe and then things that are almost ripe. And we'll let it sit for a couple days to just finish ripening some more. We don't want the stuff that's very ripe to start rotting, but we want to just give a bit of chance to the stuff that's a little bit less ripe to get more mature. And then we'll extract it. And what we use at this point for large seed lots is we use something called the millet wet seed extractor that we can put the fruit through. It cuts it all up and then extracts the seed. But even now, at this point, we'll still go through 2 or 3 5-gallon buckets, sometimes by hand, and do some seed extraction, especially if I want to keep the fruit of those peppers, or hot peppers, for example, to make a hot sauce afterwards, to toss into the crock with some carrots, onions, some sweet peppers, and maybe blend them all first. Garlic and onions especially, and ginger. Did I mention those? Anyway, blend them all together, put them in the crock for a few weeks on the counter, and then, have a hot sauce for the winter. So if I want to keep the fruit, I will extract some of those seeds by hand. So that's most of what I wanted to tell you about peppers. I mean, the big thing is go out and pick some fruit, take the seed out, and keep it. And then put it with your seed once it's dry. And when you're starting to do your crop plan next year, plan to grow some out to see what it's like. And I bet it's going to do pretty good. Just make sure it's open pollinated. That's probably the biggest thing. And there you are. So go out to the garden and pick some peppers. And maybe at this point I should also plug the Seed Farmer book. If you want to know more crops that are easy to start with as a seed farmer or just a seed gardener, I think you'll love the Seed Farmer book, which came out last fall, has all kinds of colorful pictures that show you the different steps for different crops, and it has chapters encouraging you to start pretty experimentally with a first seed mindset when you're going out harvesting your first seed, a little bit like I'm telling you today, to just go and do it. And then then there's also warnings about what crops maybe you want to be a little bit more, take a little bit more care with to avoid cross-pollination, plus a whole lot more in that book. So I think the Seed Farmer is the perfect resource for you. And that's episode 30 of the Seed Farmer podcast. If you like this type of short episode focused on a single crop, please let me know. I really want to hear your feedback and whether I should keep doing this in a format like this, and what you'd want to know that I haven't mentioned today, what would help you out. All right. So thank you to Sophia Sedalton for the theme music. You can hear more of their music at sophiasedalton.com. Thank you to Molly Brisebois for editing this episode, and thank you so much for listening. You can find more seed growing resources at my blog at seedgrowers.farm. While you're there, you can subscribe to my newsletter full of seed growing, crop planning, and farm spreadsheets. You can also find out where to order a copy of my book, The Seed Farmer, a complete guide to growing, using, and selling your own seed. And you can support the podcast at spreadsheet.farm/supportpodcast or follow the link in the show notes. If you haven't already subscribed to the episode, now's the time. You wouldn't want to miss the next episode. Until then, happy farming.